Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Would you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbors. You're watching Your Average Bear Gaming, and I'm pretending to be a really, really nice television celebrity. I hope that was funny. I don't know. But today, we're not going to pretend land. We're going to paint the sky. 3 of this guy. It's the XV8 Crisis suit, I think. And it's fully magnetized, so all the bits and bobs, all the weapons, shield generators, etc. can come on and off at will, which means that we've got a lot of weapons to paint. Want to watch it? I hope you do. Feels like it's been a long time since I've been able to paint anything, and that's probably because I spent probably 2 weeks magnetizing, and 2 weeks seems like a long time, but there's a lot of little pieces, a lot of drilling, a lot of drying, a lot of cleaning up, and I skipped a couple of days. I'm working a little more these days at my real job, so I'm just kind of taking it a little easy. That last thing was really challenging, the magnetization bit. But now it's time for me to do some painting, and I'm looking forward to it because I think I have a solid plan. One of the problems I was having in my last, when I was painting the infantry, is I was having trouble contrasting these these thicker armor plates from the thinner armor plates. Like on the troopers, the thinner armor plates corresponds to the the fabric under armor cloth stuff, and I went with like a darker shade of gray, but I didn't quite like the results, and I knew I had to keep working at it. This thicker armor, I think of it as a primary and secondary colors for the armor now. The primary being the lighter gray, secondary being the darker gray. I experimented with a couple of things. I think the last thing I painted was the Coalstar battlesuit, and I went with white and I darkened it up with some dark tone, and it looked fine, but I think I accidentally ran across a better solution. And the better solution is going to be this. I'm going to use actual shades of gray. So I'm not really good at mixing my own custom colors. I know that if you want gray, you can mix some black with some white, and you manipulate the amount of each and you get whatever shade of gray you want. I'm really not good at that, and particularly I'm not good at recreating. If I get there by random chance, recreating it later is always a challenge for me, and I don't want to end up with 3 different shades of gray. So I'm going to use pre-mixed colors, and so I've got the ash gray for the primary gray, primary armor color, and the necromancer cloak for my secondary color, secondary armor. And as per usual, I'm going to make sure that these are glazed. So I have some on my wet pellets. I've added some water. I'm ready to go to paint, but I want to show you kind of the other thing. So you'll notice that these guys are magnetized. So there's these little accessories you can put kind of anywhere. There's these weapons or shield systems, whatever, you could put kind of anywhere. And I actually did this by accident, but I could actually mount them on the shoulder if I wanted. Like, I know it's not, canon or, allowed by the rules necessarily, but I just so happened to align all the magnets so that I could do something cool like this if I ever decided I wanted to. I don't know, kind of neat. Unnecessary, but but whatever, right? So these are all built on sub-assemblies, so the weapons are separate, the heads are separate, but I also want to show you this other problem with my magnetizing approach. look at all these weapons. These I have to paint as well as the rest of the model. So these are the main weapons and also the little attachments that go, like sensor systems or marker lights or whatever it is that these guys have. So I'm going to have to do a lot of extra painting to get through this project. That's fine. So I'm going to put these aside. And I'll show you the sub-assemblies I chose. So I tend to paint with things kind of separated out. So I've made it so that I could paint kind of large pieces separately and then glue them together. That way I don't interfere with myself as I'm trying to paint. So every model is made up of the body segment. I can paint this in one piece relatively easily, should be fine. Two arms, I can paint these independently of each other. These two jump pack deals, I'll paint those separately. And finally, the head, I'll paint that separately. Once these are all painted up, I'll assemble them together and give them a nice varnish, flat matte varnish, and I should be done. So I'm going to take these apart, and then I'm going to start laying down the glaze. You've probably seen me paint glaze before, so I won't focus on it. I'll just show you a little bit of the painting, and then I'll show you the finished product, unless I find something particularly challenging. So here's the model with the secondary color on all the secondary parts. Ooh, I missed a little spot right there. I'll cover that up. And you'll notice the coverage isn't very good, and that's kind of standard for my first coat of glaze on my models. It's not always the case. It kind of depends on the paint that I'm using. It's kind of separating a bit. I think it was a little too thin. And so for the second coat, I actually do want to thin it out more, but since it's already separating, I've added just a little bit of the quick wash medium. It's this stuff right here. It just kind of helps the paint stick together some more, but I don't want to thin it down too much, so I added a little bit more water. And so the second coat is going to go on there. It's going to smooth out all these patchy areas, darken up the color a bit, and so that'll be a nice thing. And so not every time, but a lot of times I feel like I need to do a second coat, which is weird with the glaze, right? Sometimes with the glaze you kind of just want to do the one coat so you can see what's underneath, but you know, you do what you have to do. And so I'll just show you what it looks like. So I finally got the base on there, and it took me quite a bit longer than usual because for some reason my paints just weren't working. They weren't adhering to this model. I have no idea what was going on, and in fact you can kind of still see some patches that I missed, so I need to go back and touch those up. But the gray that you see here, or both grays, represent multiple coats of my glaze, and it's still kind of patchy. But I managed to get most of the base on there. I still need to do some touch-ups, as you saw, but they're mostly done, and they're ready for my washing step. And so here's where I'm hoping that my new color selection, using this light gray and this dark gray, which really has some brownish tones to it that I wasn't expecting. I've used it before, but I don't remember the brown tone. Maybe it only shows up on white undercoats, I guess. But the plan is to go ahead and carefully add some wash to show off all those cool armor details. I'm going to start with the easiest part here, the legs. And this is dark tone from Army Painter, and I've washed it down. I've thinned it out a little bit, not as much as I had expected. And the idea here is I'm going to get it on everything that's gray. In previous towel builds, I used different tones, but I ended up doing basically this, just not all in one step. And when I realized, look, what you're doing is you're just adding a gray wash over everything, or a black wash over everything. Just put it all in one step. It'll save you some time. And the goal here is to be clean about it. So you can kind of see that I've managed to avoid many of the pooling problems that I've had in the past. And so wherever there is a little pooling that I don't want, I just kind of go in there, dab, and then I move it over somewhere else. So I want a nice thin coat over everything that's gray. And that should kind of bring everything kind of in line. It should be kind of a uniform grayness over the whole thing. And what I basically am hoping to accomplish here is that I want to bring both of these gray colors into closer proximity to each other. That's the idea. It's worked okay in the past, but basically I want to eliminate some of the difference between the light gray and the dark gray to just kind of make them slightly different shades of the same color, if that makes any sense. That was kind of the goal from the beginning of this towel project, and I haven't been very successful, but I'm hoping that this time, all the practice that I've had with my previous towel models will culminate in a successful implementation of the vision that I had when I started. Alright, I'm tackling the bottom half of all of these models first. Once that dries, I'll hit the top half, but so far it kind of looks good. It's muted the difference between the two colors. Let's see what it looks like when it dries. By the way, if I look a little shakier than usual, that's because I just finished with a little cardio workout, and cardio workouts and finesse, like detailed modeling, painting, they don't mix well together. So give yourself some rest between cardio, or any workouts really, and painting. So I've gotten to this point in my model painting where it's become necessary to mount it on its base. That's because as I'm handling it to kind of paint things here and there, I started noticing that the edges of some places were getting the paint was coming off, just from all the touching. It probably doesn't help that I enjoy painting while having Cheeto encrusted fingers. I mean, that's not actually true, but that's kind of how it feels like. Dude, I'm just moving you around. How is it that all the stuff is coming off? And it's always right there at the edges, like there you'll see that unnatural wear on that one shoulder pauldron thing. So, I touched them up and I mounted them on these bases. The bases are just kind of basic, no frills kind of a deal. I'll probably embellish them a little bit after I'm done painting, but I used some air-dried clay to simulate rocks. In this, I painted them black to look like onyx. Is it onyx? Whatever that black volcanic rock is. Obsidian. There we go. To simulate obsidian, except for the shine. And I put it on some red texture paste. Did a little bit of a wash over it, and then a little bit of a highlight with a dry brush for highlights. And I added red highlights to the stone. I think it's more evident in this model right here. So it looks like some of the dust from here kind of ended up on top of the stone, which is what one would expect on windy terrain. And so I'm pretty happy with it. It's not bad, but it's very, very basic. So I'm ready to move on, almost ready to move on to the actual detail part of this model. But one of the things I did want to point out, and it's a problem I've had with a couple of towel models, these bipedal walker models, is that getting contact with the base to use super glue with, it's it's tricky, and it hasn't worked very well for me. So what I've been doing is I've been using little globs of Tamiya epoxy putty. Is it Tamiya? I think it's Tamiya. And so that way it creates this kind of a strong bond. It doesn't help. So there's a small contact area, right? And it doesn't help that I usually put them on some kind of terrain. I glue them onto the terrain and not onto the base, so there's not a lot of contact points or a lot of surface area. So you have to kind of create a surface for these to mount to. And you know, these stones, these are air dried clay with paint over them. It doesn't form a really strong bond with super glue. Same thing with the terrain here, especially since I've made it nice and bumpy. It's got a very kind of uneven surface to bond with. So I find that I've had to use the Tamiya epoxy putty to adhere these directly, and that's, you know, it's fine, it works. It's an extra step, which I'm not a fan of, but it's got to happen. But that leaves me with the task of cleaning this up, and I have to be careful when I clean this up to not disrupt the surface the model is standing on. If I clear too much of this away, it tends to like lose adhesion or something. I don't know what the deal is. So I have to scrape some of this off. Anywhere there's this excess, so you'll see here I've kind of taken some of this off, but I can't take off too much, right? Just what looks like excess. And then once that's done, I have to go back and paint over that to kind of blend the epoxy putty onto the surface that it's standing on. It's, you know, it's an extra process, and it doesn't usually end up super duper clean, but I do my best. And so this is probably something that you'll have to resort to if you're doing, you know, stuff like I'm doing, where it's on a textured base and maybe it's elevated. You may have to do stuff like this to make sure that it stands okay. So it's not horribly hard. It's just an extra step that, you know, it wouldn't be necessary if you weren't doing just a little bit extra on the bases. So I'm going to clean this up, and then I'll move on to the detail process. Alright, so here is the model now that I've attached it to the base, and I've kind of blended in the epoxy putty, so it looks like it's part of the base. If you look carefully, you can tell that I've done something weird there, but for the most part, it looks fine. And it's a relatively secure hold. It isn't, you know, really secure, but it's probably as good as it's going to get. And it's allowed for me to still do kind of the dynamic pose I was going for. So yeah, I think it's worked out all right. Which means now I get to start working on the detailing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this symbol right there and that symbol right there with my usual bronze. Oh, actually, just have to thin down the bronze a little bit. I don't want to use the normal consistency. It's a little weird. So there's the bronze. Alright, so it's time to do the detailing. The first detail I'm going to add a little bronze on that Tau emblem there and the Tau emblem on the shoulder pad. This will be the only two spots on the models where I have any sort of metallic. And so I start off with the bronze over the black undercoat, so it's nice and reflective. Once that dries up, I'll go over it with a silver dry brush, and it should give me a nice soft metallic color. Actually, before the dry brush, I'm going to add some dark wash to make sure that the emblem part is visible. On these models, these are the normal troopers, not the sergeant type. I'm going to add a little bit of color here to the crotchal area. There's just a lot of gray when you look at them up front. So I'm going to add a splash of color here, but I'm going to prep that with some white, just so that when I add the actual color, which is going to be the blue, it stands out. You can see it. Oh. And you got to work clean at this point. So any spillage, you pick it up with a dryer brush. The next detail is going to be these faces. So I'm going to make sure that those lenses have a bright color that stands out. To do that, I'm going to start with a little undercoat of white so that any color I add will stand out. This is the surgeon's head, and I went with this white and blue color thing. It looks okay. It looks different enough from the normal head, but I feel like it needs a splash of color. In fact, I think the sergeant needs a special color to kind of pick him out as a sergeant, other than just kind of this, special looking helmet. And I haven't decided what color I want to use, but I'm at that point where I really can't delay that decision anymore, because I have to do that not just to the helmet, but I actually have to do that probably to at least some of this pauldron. There needs to be some visual indicator that this guy is special. So what color should I use? It's a really good question. Orange is out because orange is the color that I use for accents on my weapon, so I can't use that. I could use red, but it's been done. I think, yeah, I'm gonna try this purple. It's a cool color, so it should kind of complement what's already there, but it should still stand out a bit, I'm hoping. That's what it looks like with the purple. I'm not exactly happy with the purple right now. The glaze is really, really thin. I couldn't get a nice thicker glaze out of it. It's just coming out pretty watery out of the bottle, so I'll probably have to do a couple of applications. Now that the little undercoat of white is dry, I'm going to go back and give it a little color. Little happy dot of color. When that dries, a little bit of blue tone wash to make it match up with all the other blue. Yeah, the purple I was using for the sergeant just isn't doing it for me. Gonna have to find a different purple. Nope, that didn't work either. We're gonna go with, let's try alien purple. This guy. Right, the bronze icons, they're nice and dry. So the next step is to give them a coat of dark tone. It's been watered down, it's not the full strength. I really just want to emphasize the icon, kind of like so. So that way when I go back over it with a dry brush with silver, you can see the lines inside the emblem. Right, time for the lenses inside the helmets. And I'm gonna go with gray, with red for this one. Standard. Just a little dot over the white overcoat or undercoat right there. Another one here. And another one there. Oops, messy. Let's keep it clean. Let's keep it clean. On the model itself, there's not a ton of details, but there are a couple of things I do want to kind of pick out. So this right here, that little kind of vent thing, I'm going to make that black. And the same thing, you'll notice up here, there's a little housing that has two little lights. I'm going to put black inside there, so that way when I go back and touch the buttons, the lights, they'll contrast with the darkness inside. The darkness inside, like my own heart. I think the Sergeant model is ready for his purple accent color. Kind of like so. Probably needs a second coat to make it look good, but that's the start. Now we're going to do some dry brushing. A little bit on the bronze icon there. Take my cheapo brush with the fairly stiff bristles, get a little bit of silver paint on it, dry it off mostly, and then just kind of doop doop doop. That gives the bronze a very nice shine. Softens up the color, so it's a nice blend of bronze and silver. Gives me a nicer effect than either one of them by themselves. And since I'm dry brushing, that dark wash, the lines of the emblem, they're still there. To this little recess, it's hard to tell right now, but there's two little dots on there. That would be great for lights. I'm going to do some undercoating of the light with this little white dot. Use my magnifying glass here because it's hard to see, it's so small. Just touch it and clean up any mistakes you made with a little bit of water. There you go. Now you can see the white dots inside that little housing right there. Over that, we're going to add some colored lights, maybe some green, maybe some red. Let's see where the model takes us. Now the Sergeant's head, it's got the purple all over it. It's nice and purple, but it can't just be purple. Neither can his armor. So we're going to go back in there with a little bit of wash, and for purple you can either mix your own purple wash, right, using some purple paint and some washing it with or mixing it in with a little bit of this quick shade medium. I've never done that, but I think that's the theory behind it. I'm just going to use one of these because purple is a combination of red or blue, or red and blue, and so either one of these will do a nice job. And I think for this one I'm going to use the red tone. Let's add some color to those little buttons. I went with a very light green, and again I'm going to use my magnifying glass because it requires a steady hand and really good aim. Right, the sergeant's helmet is ready for an undercoat on the lens. The side of the commander's head, or the sergeant's head, also has one of those little tile icons. So, let me go ahead and add some bronze. At this stage, I still have a lot of weapons to paint and these little extra doohickeys. I've gotten some started, but there's just a lot of them. The primary color for each of these weapons is going to be black, as you can see here. I've just got a ton of them. So, I can't put it off anymore. Alright, my weapons are almost all based. I've got a couple of little things that I haven't touched yet, but I'm out of these little sticks. So this next step is I'm going to enhance the look of this thing by giving this a bit of a dry brush, and I think I'm going to do the dry brushing on the model itself as well. I haven't decided, but I'm leaning that way. And so usually, I don't know, if you're using a glaze like I did, a dry brush isn't strictly necessary, but I think for some parts it really does help make things look better. It's worth the effort. And so for these weapons, I have found that it does make a big difference. And since I've got a decent dry brush, I'm going to go in there and just give it a little touch of something. Yeah, on these models, I think I'm going to do some edge highlighting, some dry brushing or whatever it's called, just to kind of enhance some of those lines that have been kind of muted by the washing process. It also helps make sure that those highlights are gray and not white, like the glaze left behind white. So it's not an all-around dry brush, it's kind of a selective dry brush, just to help bring out some of those details that have been lost. So I spent some time painting up these weapons after I did the dry brush, and I have quite a few back here, and I find that I'm just not happy with the way they looked. So this is an example of a weapon where the thing that I disliked the most came in. So this is the second batch, so it's not fully painted, but you'll notice there's an orange canister, and on the already painted weapon, I also added a little bit of a glow on the inside. There's this little, I don't know, indentations, grooves or whatever. And so it was this red color plus this orange color, and it just didn't look good. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and just do one accent color per gun. So here, this is to be orange. I went over it with some black to hide that. I'll maybe add some gray back in. And so, like, these need an additional coat. So I have to go back and redo a lot of these. I guess the point I'm trying to make with this is that, I don't know, I have kind of a minimalist style, and a bunch of different colors just doesn't really do the trick for me. And so, you know, I experimented, and I found I didn't like the results, and that's okay. Experiments don't always go the way you want them, and so you just, you just fix it up. So I think from now on, at least with Tau weapons, it's just going to be a single color, a single accent color. I'll still do, primary, secondary, or whatever, but accent colors, just the one. I'm putting on the last bit of the details on the weapons and accessories. I gotta tell you, it's taking a while, but I'm getting really close to the end. I've just got one last thing to do, and that's these shield generators. I've given them so they're mostly black, but I've given the edges an undercoat of white glaze because I want to do like a special effect, like I'm using a mix of Void Shield blue. I've made a glaze out of that, almost like a quick shade wash. And so I'm going to add this really light blue color to kind of hint at like a power weapon, like a source of energy that's coming off of this shield. That's kind of the idea. Once this goes on, I'll give it a wash of my blue tone wash, and that should complete the effect. Kind of a lazy man's power sword, or like a power weapon kind of a deal. So you get the effect without, you know, spending hours perfecting the details or whatever. The weapons are finally done. Finally! Look at all those weapons! Holy cow! That was so many. Really, that was so many. Kind of want you to see what these shield generators look like with that that blue tone over the really pale blue. It kind of has that appearance of that patchy kind of a energy glow without all the work. Now, it's not perfect, but you know, for the amount of time I spent on it, I'll take it for sure. All of these pieces now have gotten a light spring of Tamiya color. This is the flat or the matte varnish. It doesn't actually say anywhere. Oh, never mind. Flat clear. That's what it says right there on the cap. So that's usually my last step, except that I've been doing something these past couple of projects to kind of help bring back some of the luster of some of these elements. So just as a for example, I spent all this time creating these emissive lighting effects, right? So we have those little blue lights on these pieces and some red lights on those pieces, and then I hit them with that flat coat, and so it removes some of the shine from these pieces, and that's usually fine, but I do have a little bit of this gloss varnish, and so my idea here is to go over those pieces that are supposed to be emissive with some gloss varnish to make them shine, to make them look like they're supposed to be kind of, I don't know, shiny, bright, and that sort of thing. Now, I've done it once before, and it looked okay, but to be honest, I don't really know what I'm buying. What I mean is, like, I don't know what impact that last step has on my emissive lighting pieces. I'm going to give it a shot here, and I think I'm going to make a video later on testing it. But for now, let's just add the gloss varnish to all these little parts, and let's just, on the assumption that it's going to make them look shiny. And I mean, it kind of does. I don't know if you can, the camera picks it up, but it gives it this nice shine on just those pieces. So I'm going to do that to all of these little emissive light parts. Note that I'm not going to do it on everything that has color, right? So there's color here on the back of this thing. It's supposed to be like a green LED light, or a green light. Doesn't necessarily have to be LED. But I'm not going to add that to these missiles, right? These are not lights, these are missiles, so they're not going to get it. On the actual models, the eyes are going to get that shine. Some of the little lights kind of on that chassis, they're going to get those lights, and that's it. Well, here they are at long last. My Tau XV8 crisis suits, fully painted, fully magnetized, and pretty not the worst I've ever done. Yeah, they're not great. The color scheme I was chasing, turns out, well, I accomplished what I was aiming at, but I don't know that it's really what I wanted. There's a kind of a strong lack of contrast between the two types of gray, and it's what I wanted, but I got what I wanted, and I don't know if I like it. So I guess I can say I've learned a couple of things. For the painting process, maybe I will aim for a bit more contrast between the grays. So the primary color, this light gray here, maybe step it up, go back to a white, and then just darken it up with a dark wash. And then the secondary armor color, maybe bring that up a bit too, and then darken it up. It's too close to black here, I think, is the issue. And this is what that shield generator looks like with that gloss varnish on top. I think that looks pretty neat. Yeah, it's not my best work, and I don't really know why. It just kind of left me with an overall sense of meh. It could have been better. I don't know if changing up the color scheme would help things. I'm hoping that it does. The bases are fairly simple. I added a couple of these little transparent crystals. I have a bunch of them. I haven't used them in a while. I figured, why not? Probably the biggest takeaway from this project is the magnetization. While it's fun, it has some potential use. It leaves you with a ton of weapons. These are going to live in your transport case and see very little use. So you're expending an awful lot of effort for not a lot of bang, at least for the most part. The last thing that I think as a critique I want to point out. So here's the model. You'll notice it has this lean back, and that, while sort of intentional, also I don't like it. It's fairly consistent here, and I think it has to do with the way I built them. The leg positions, I need to hunch them forward a bit. They're all kind of universally leaning back, some worse than others. Yeah. So, I intended to do it, but I don't like the result as much. So far as the color scheme goes, I think I need to go back to the drawing board. I think this looks good on certain models and less good on others, I think is kind of what I'm coming to think about. On this Sergeant, I wanted to pick him out with his own special color, and I used purple. I figured, stick with a cool color so you get the contrast, but also you kind of remain in the same spectrum of the color palette. And it's okay, but not great either. Yeah, there's just a whole lot of not great for this project. Well, I've got something to think about for sure. My next Tau project, I have some things to change up a bit. But there you have it. At least it didn't take me a ton of time. I mean, the models themselves didn't take me a ton of time. The weapons, it took forever. There was just so many of them. So, yeah. If you had to magnetize, maybe be more selective about that than I was. Admittedly, I went pretty ambitious, and I went for the whole kit and caboodle, and that takes time. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope at least you learned some of the things that you maybe could do, but more importantly, some of the things that you maybe want to avoid to make your life just a little bit easier. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Your Average Bear. Have a nice afternoon. Be nice to yourselves and each other. Peace. Hello, neighbor. That's so stupid. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Would you be my neighbor? Hello, neighbors. You're watching. No.